Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the channel. Apologies for my voice right now. I'm currently a little bit on the sick side, but I feel like that I can still kind of like talk to you guys and things like that. And as you guys can see by the title, we are going to be going through some spring recommendations along with my spring TBR. Now, for this one, I don't really have a lot of stuff in the recommendations portion. I have about like 5 books for about each category and things like that, So it's going to be a little bit on the shorter side today, but that's okay. I'm trying to figure out what I read the most during like springtime. And for me, it's either kind of a mix of fiction, mystery/thrillers, or romance a lot of the time. So that is how the categories are going to be split up today. We're going to start with romance, then we're going to go into mystery and thrillers, and then we are going to go into fiction novels and such. So yeah, let's get into it. Okay, so like I said, the first category that we have is romance. And I will say, I personally don't tend to read a lot of romances, but I feel like that like a lot of people like to read romances because they're getting into summertime. It's getting a little bit warmer and love is in the air type of thing. It's a new beginning. And the first book that I have that I want to recommend is Playing for Keeps by Alexandra Bellefleur. I was really lucky to be able to read this early in like late December, early January, because I got the e-arc from NetGalley. Again, thanks to NetGalley for that. I really liked this story, and basically the synopsis of this is it follows these 2 PR people and such, like personal relations, pretty much, or no, not personal relationships, publicists. One of them is named Poppy, and she's getting her life back on track, and she's a publicist to one of the most promising NFL's quarterback. He makes a public pass at this very, very popular singer named Lyric, and then Lyric's notorious publicist, Rosalind Sinclair, reaches out to Poppy and Cash, who is the person that Poppy represents, being like, Lyric is equally interested in having a relationship. And then it basically follows them to Poppy and Rosalind getting into a relationship with each other, and it just kind of follows from there. If I were to describe this book, it's basically if Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift's publicist started dating, but make it sapphic, is what I would describe this as. It's very funny. It's very witty. It's a little bit on the spicy side, so just be aware of that. But that is Playing for Keeps by Alexandra Bellefleur. I personally want to keep diving into her stuff. But yeah, that's the first book that we have down. And then the second book is a book from a favorite author of mine, one of the first authors I got into when it came to romance, and that is The Striker by Anna Huang. Basically, what this follows is it follows Asher Donovan, who's one of the greatest footballers, aka soccer players of all time, and he gets into a little bit of reckless antics after he transfers to a different team, and then in turn he has to do a forced bonding off-season cross training with his rival turned teammate, and then you figure out that it is dance that they're doing cross training for pretty much, and their dance instructor is actually his rival/teammate's sister, Scarlett, she was very much a former prima ballerina whose career was cut short due to a tragic accident. She's a dancer, but she's also a teacher and such, and then she spends the summer cross training with Asher Donovan, and she finds they find themselves where her older brother can't cross train with them anymore. It's just Scarlett and Asher doing it, and it's a little bit of like a forced proximity thing. It's very, very fun. It's British as well too, if you couldn't tell by the language and such. And if you don't mind a little bit of a Thickums McGee type of book, then you would 100% love this. I gave it a 4-star personally, and I think this would be a really good one to read in the springtime and such like that, even though the majority of it takes place over the summertime. It starts in the spring, kind of like the new start to things, and it's just overall a great time. So yeah, that's The Striker for ya. And then the next one, this one actually takes place in the springtime because it's right around this time where graduations happen for high school, and that is I Kiss Sarah Wheeler by Casey McQuiston. This is one of my favorite books by them of all time, because one of the things I always say is that this book can be described by 2 words, which is gay awakening. And pretty much what this follows is it follows a girl named Chloe Green. She's so close to winning. She is basically in an academic like rivalry with this girl named Sarah. Then like a month before graduation, Sarah kisses Chloe and then vanishes pretty much. And then Chloe teams up with this guy named Smith, who's Sarah's longtime quarterback boyfriend, and then Rory, who is Sarah's bad boy neighbor with a crush on Sarah as well too. And they work together to pretty much like figure out why Sarah left and why she's leaving them, these different clues. It is funny. It is young adult as well too. I remember reading this and just like giggling so much because it's so absurd, but also very, very funny. It takes place in the spring months, like around like April-esque May sort of vibes, you know? So it's a really good romance to like read during the springtime as well too, you know? So yeah, that is I Kiss Sarah Wheeler. And then the next one I have is also by Casey McQuiston, and that is One Last Stop by them. This one follows August, who is 23 and she's moving to New York for the first time. And she's just trying to get through life and just trying to like figure out like what she wants to do with her life when she runs into a girl on the train named Jane. And she's like dazzling, charming, and mysterious. Jane has her kind of rough around the edges. But then she notices that Jane kind of talks a little bit in an interesting way, specifically how she talks like she's not from the same decade. And then you kind of figure out that Jane is not actually from the decade, and then you kind of follow from there. It is very much magical realism type of vibes. This, I believe, was my second book that I read by them. No, it was the other one. But this one, I read this one during the spring months as well too, and I really, really liked reading it during there. It takes place in New York. It really gives the vibes of New York. I've never been to New York, but it just gives the vibes of New York so perfectly well. And it's just so funny and so silly and just so romantic in a way. That's how I would describe it, at least. It was gorgeous in my opinion. So I think this one's a really, really good one to read in the springtime. And then the final book that I have in this category was be really, really good to read in the spring is Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. I'm currently reading the second book right now, which is This Could Be Us, but I read Before I Let Go last year in like February, March time, I think it was. It is a second chance romance between these two people, Yasmin and Josiah, who they were together for a long time. They had kids and like a restaurant together, but then something happened to where they no longer were able to like be in each other's lives and such. So they divorced each other, and then doing like co-parenting things and owning a restaurant together, they start to kind of find like joy again with each other and realize that they want to be together, and you kind of follow from there. This is what I would call a very much like women's fiction type of vibe as to compare to like a romance. It really does talk about the importance of what it is to be a human and to fall in love, if that makes any sense. For me, when I read this, I wasn't too sure if I was going to like it, but then I ended up loving it. It mostly takes place over like a lot of time. I think like you have like a before and after of what their relationship was like, and you get to see how their relationship fell apart in the first place as well. But I will say, do look up the trigger warnings before reading this book, because it really can be kind of scary. So I just want you guys to know that before getting into this story as well. But that is all I have for the romance category. And next up, we are going to go on to the mysteries and thriller genre. Again, these ones, I only have like 5 of them as well too. And these ones kind of really don't have many rhymes or reasons, because I can get disappointed by thrillers very quickly and easily. And I'll tell you which one of these are more like mystery/thriller vibes. And this first one I have is The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. I don't know how you pronounce it personally, but that's how I pronounce it at least. And basically what happens is it follows this woman named Alicia. She shoots her husband pretty much and doesn't say a word after the attack. And then this guy named Theo, criminal psychotherapist named Theo, is captivated by Alicia's story and pretty much just tries to figure out what exactly happened the night that Alicia shot her husband pretty much. It's really told in an interesting way where you get both Alicia's point of view and Theo's point of view. And when I first read this, I loved it so much. It was one of my first books by him, and it was a 5-star for me personally. And I will say, if you do read a lot of thrillers, then the ending might like be a little bit on the more predictable side of things, but I personally could not predict it to save my life. It was very fast paced as well too, doesn't really linger that well, and it was something that I feel like that if you're really trying to get into thrillers and have really no idea where to start, or specifically psychological thrillers, this is a really good start to that. So that's that one. And then this next one is technically in the mystery genre, which I read last year, and that is Vera Huang's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers. This one was a funny, grand old time, to say the least. And pretty much what it is it follows this woman named Vera Huang. She is a lonely old lady, and she lives above her forgotten tea shop in the middle of San Francisco's Chinatown. And then she loves sipping on a good cup of tea and doing some healthy detective work on the internet to see what her Gen Z son is up to and things like that. And then one morning when she's going downstairs, she finds that a man is dead in her tea shop. So she calls the police, obviously, but then the police aren't doing anything about it. And then she decides that she is going to figure out who murdered this dude that happened to be in her tea shop at the time. If you really like seeing older characters and found family vibes, you would 100% like this. I did like it and such. And there's a reason why I'm recommending it. Even though I read it in the fall time, I think this one would be perfect in the springtime because you get a lot of imagery of what it's like outside and things like that, and the tea things as well. And it's just overall just a fun, grand old time, So yeah, that is Vera Huang's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers. And then the next one I have is more of a thriller/horror vibe, and it's the start of a series which we are getting the 3rd book this year later, and that is The Butcher and the Wren by Elena Urquhart. I love this series so much. I cannot wait for The Butcher Legacy to come out. And basically what this one follows is it follows this dude who's a serial killer named Jeremy, and then it follows Dr. Ren Muller, who is the medical examiner, and Jeremy is pretty much a serial killer out in New Orleans, and he is known as the Bayou Butcher specifically. And he and Ren have a little bit of a past, and you kind of figure out try and figure out how they're connected, why they're connected as well. And it's a really curious type of story, it's very curious, it's very binding and things like that, and it's such an addictive read, it's also very tiny. This first book is extremely tiny, I loved it personally, and I think you would too, mostly because you can kind of read this anytime, because I can't really remember exactly what time frame it takes place in. You can kind of read it during all the seasons, but I remember reading this, I believe, in the springtime of, I think it was freshman year, but I can't remember off the top of my head. But I remember reading it around that time when it first came out, and it was just so great. So if you are a big fan of thrillers and horror, you would 100% like this. Okay, and this next one is a little bit more on the mystery side of things, and it's a book that has very controversial opinions, in my opinion. People either really love it or people really hate it. I'm on the side of the internet where I really love this book, and that is called Darling Girls by Sally Hempworth. Now the reason why I'm saying that this is a mystery is because when this book was first officially being published, everybody was saying oh, it's a really great thriller, it's very thrilling, you'll love it. And that's where a lot of these false kind of advertisements kind of put the book down, because it's not thrilling whatsoever. I would more call this mysterious. There's an active mystery going on, but it's not you're thrilling at the edge of your seat when it comes to this story. And basically what it is it follows 3 foster sisters. I can't remember what their names are off the top of my head, but it follows them, and they have to go back to their foster home because they find out that there's a body pretty much under the foster home's foundations, pretty much, and trying to figure out what what exactly happened there. You get all of their point of views as to how exactly it worked out. I personally loved it. I gave it 5 stars. And the reason why I'm also saying like the mystery aspect, like I said before, it is not very thrilling whatsoever. And honestly, if you like characters that are low-key a little bit toxic and are low-key kind of just like bitches sometimes, then you will more than likely like this. So yeah, that's me selling you on Darling Girls. I'm going to try and wrap this up as quickly as possible because it is getting harder to speak. The final one that I have in this category is The Last Word by Taylor Adams. You can kind of read this at any time, but I read this last year. It was around like end of summer, I think it was, but it was perfect either way because you can really read this in either like spring or summer and you'll be fine. Basically what it is, it follows this woman named Emma. She's basically house sitting this cabin for like the week, and then she reads a really bad like thriller novel and gives it a 1 star. And she's there with her dog house sitting, and then strange things kind of happen around the house that she is house sitting, and you realize that like she's getting into heated arguments online with the author, and you kind of realize that the author may be watching her in a way. This is one of those thrillers where, in my opinion, I didn't need to figure out the ending because it just told itself in a very compelling way that I wasn't even looking for the ending specifically. And it's a really good thriller for people, in my opinion, who love the thriller genre and crave something just a little bit more. This is more for sure. I can't wait to read his next book that's coming out, which as of recording this is release day for it, but I don't have the copy since I pre-ordered it. Going back to The Last Word, I loved it personally. Again, it is kind of, I can't really tell you too much about it because it would be spoiling, but the way that like the author and Emma kind of get into their arguments and things like that, it is very just bone chilling and just like, oh, so creepy. You know what I mean? I hope y'all know what I mean. Yeah, that is The Last Word by Taylor Adams. And now we are going on to the fiction category. So again, 5 books in this category and keeping it kind of brief and just kind of selling you on why I think they would be good in the springtime specifically. Okay, so this one is a little bit more of an intriguing one because one, it's Stephen King and it is Billy Summers by him. This is technically fiction, and basically what this is about this dude named Billy Summers who is a really, really good hitman, but he wants out of the business, and in order to be out of the business, he needs to do one final job. And then when he does that final job, it goes horribly wrong, and then you kind of follow from there. That's kind of what the synopsis kind of gives you, you know? It's part of like a war story, a part of a love letter to like small town America, things like that. I did enjoy it. I can't remember too much of the intimate plot, but I remember when reading a certain part of the story, it really kind of made me smile and made me just like feel like a lot of emotions, if that made any sense whatsoever. That is Billy Summers. This next one that I have as well too is very, very popular, especially within the literature space, which is where I resonate with a lot, and that is Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. I had to technically read this for a publishing class. Like we read like the first couple chapters of the book, and then I decided to audiobook the rest of this. It was so good. And pretty much what it follows is it follows these 2 authors named Athena and June. Yeah. It follows these authors named Athena and June. And June is very much a struggling author. She has published a couple books, but has not found much success in them. While Athena is the exact opposite. Athena is very successful, very popular in her stuff. She's getting Netflix deals for her books to kind of like get them turned into movies or TV TV shows or whatever, and they're friends, but June is very much someone where you can tell that she does not like Athena whatsoever, but she's just nice to her because of the circles that she's in. They were in the same program at college, so they went to the same university together. And one night when they are celebrating a new deal that Athena got for a book being turned into a movie, they are making food, and Athena basically chokes on a pancake and dies right in front of June. And I know it's very sad, but it tells you that on the book. And then June, as she's like talking to the police, or like before she like even does anything like that, like after she calls the police reporting the incident, she then sees an unfinished manuscript on Athena's desk. So June steals it and then writes it as her own, pretty much. And it kind of talks about like the publishing industry and plagiarism and how that works within the publishing space. Because you guys know I've been trying to get published for a long time, or I want to get published at least. So it really kind of opens up what you kind of think about the publishing world. And I will say, if you don't like being in the point of view of characters you do not like, then you might not like this, because that's kind of the point. You're kind of meant to hate June, but also like in a weird way, like relate to her, if that makes any sense. That's Yellowface for ya. It is a very, very interesting book, to say the least. And then this next one I also read recently, and that is The Wedding People. Oh, wow. Oopsies. That is The Wedding People by Alison Espach. I read this a while back and such, and I think this would be perfect in springtime, because the wedding that happens in this place takes place around spring. And pretty much what this follows is it follows this woman named Phoebe. She's arrived at this really grand hotel, or inn specifically, with not much on her bag, and she gets mistaken for being a part of this wedding that's happening at this place. You kind of go there. They kind of don't really talk about why she's there in the blurb, but just look it up if you want to know, like with trigger warnings and things like that, because it is a little bit heavy as to why she's there in the first place. But then she meets, like Phoebe pretty much meets the bride of the party, pretty much the bride of the wedding, and they make unlikely friends. And what it really does is it kind of follows like friendships and things like that. And it's one of those stories that kind of made me think deeply on many levels about certain things in life. And that's something that like we need a lot more. So if you would like that, then you would 100% like this. Personally, I feel like I'm getting a little bit off topic here, but with The Wedding People, it is one of those things where it talks about the hard things, and no matter what age you are, like specifically if you're in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, your 50s even, you can even learn something from this. Like I've recommended that my mom listen to The Wedding People for a long time, because it can give you so many life lessons and so many things like that. And yeah, that's pretty much it on The Wedding People. And then this next one is technically under the fiction category, but it could go with the mystery category as well too. And that is Wild Dark Shore by Charlotte McConaughey. This book blew up last year, and rightfully so. I did not have it on my radar whatsoever when it came to this. And basically what it follows is it follows this family on an isolated island where there are a bunch of seeds, like from around the world, specifically on this island close to like Antarctica and around Australia. And then this woman washes up on shore one day, and they nurse her back to health, and they try and figure out why she was in the ocean in the first place. And you realize that the woman is not really telling everything about her story. Same with the family as well too. And it can be very slow pacing in the beginning, but for me, I got hooked on maybe like chapter 3, chapter 4 or so, and I really, really liked it. You know, this is one of those books where I would call like a hybrid type of storyline. Like it's a fiction at its core, but it has mysterious elements around it. You know what I mean? I hope you know exactly what I mean with that. But again, it would be good in either the spring or the summertime, even though it takes place on like a cold island or whatever, it could be good in like early spring when it's still getting kind of like a little bit on the freezing side, but also still like having the nicer days during the days with like the freezing nights or whatever. So 100%. If you also do like audiobooks as well too, this is a really, really good audiobook to listen to. I audiobooked most of this and I'm really, really glad I did because I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think you guys would too. So that's Wild Dark Shore. And then the last one in this category is a book that I don't think you guys can ever escape from now that it has become part of my personality, my body, and my soul for all eternity. That is Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. At the core, this is a historical fiction novel specifically, but it's also a love story. And I can explain it, but I have a feeling that I'm going to explain it by not giving it justice pretty much. So I'm just going to read what the synopsis says for you. Joan Goodwin has been obsessed with the stars for as long as she can remember. She's content with her life as a professor of physics and astronomy and as an aunt to her precocious niece, Frances, until she comes across an advertisement seeking the first women scientists to join NASA's space shuttle program. Suddenly, Joan burns to be one of the few people to go to space. Selected from a pool of thousands of applicants in the summer of 1980, Joan begins training at Houston's Johnson Space Center alongside an exceptional group of fellow candidates: Top Gun pilot Hank Raymond and scientist John Griffin, easygoing even when the stakes are high, mission specialist Lydia Danes, who has worked too hard to play nice, warm-hearted Donna Fitzgerald navigating her own secrets, and Vanessa Ford, the magnetic and mysterious aeronautical engineer who can fix any engine and fly any plane. They become unlikely friends and prepare for their first flights. Joan finds a love she never imagined in this new light. Joan begins to question everything she thinks she knows about her place in the observable universe. Then, in December of 1984, on mission STS-LR9, it all changes in an instant. That is the perfect way to describe this book. It is something that I didn't think that I could personally connect with. And I will say this book can be a little bit of a slow start because in the beginning you're like, if you do pick this up, you're going to probably be like, why are these characters being talked about so much? And then when you get into the training process, you will understand exactly why these characters are so beloved. And by like the 50% mark, I didn't realize how much I cared for these characters and cared for this storyline. Like specifically when you go into the events of what happens in December of 1984, you will see exactly and such. It is one of those stories where it's a love story, not only for romance, but also for familial and friendships and love of your passions and love of understanding, if that makes any sense. I would 100% recommend this book all day, every day, if I could, because it is so powerful and just so extremely wonderful. And that is all I have for the book recommendations and such. Now I'm going to be going on to my spring TBR. All right, for this section of my spring TBR, these are kind of books that I kind of want to get to in the months of like March and into May as well. Some of them I plan on reading for like vlogs in the future. Some of them are book club books that some of my book clubs have already kind of like picked out beforehand of the different months that we are going to be reading. And for this one, I'm just going to keep it very brief. I'm just going to say like 2 sentences of maybe like what it's about, or like short sentences of like what it's about, why I want to read it, and just things like that. So the first one that I have on my spring TBR, I have it on my phone so I don't forget any of them. I have like 15 on here in total. And the first one that I have on my list is Half His Age by Jeanette McCurdy. I believe this is Jeanette McCurdy's first fiction novel. I read her memoir of I'm Glad My Mom Died. Would recommend that one as well too. And from what I've heard about this one is it follows a high school girl who is kind of attracted to her teacher. I think. And first initial thoughts, I think I'm gonna like it. I don't know much about like toxic characters and things like that, but it's Jeanette McCurdy. I like her writing style, and I think that she can make this really funny if she wanted to. This next one is a little bit of a random one, and that is The Lost Story by Meg Schaefer. I've had this on my Book of the Month shelf for a really, really long time, and personally, I'm craving a little bit of fantasy right now. And from what I've heard about this one is it follows these two boys who they go missing in the West Virginia State Forest. They reappear 6 months later with no explanation of where they'd gone or how they survive, pretty much, you know, and it kind of follows from there. It follows 15 years afterwards. They're finally figuring out how exactly they survived after all these years. And I think I heard pretty mixed reviews on this one, but I'm really intrigued because one, I've been wanting to get into fantasy a lot of the time and just trying out new authors. And I've heard Meg Schaefer is a really good author as well too. And then this next one, you guys will be seeing more than likely in later March because I've been meaning to start this series for a long time, and that is Shatter Me by Tahira Mafi. Everybody knows what this series is about, but it basically follows this woman named Juliet. Yeah, Juliet's touch is fatal, and this reestablishment plans to use her as a weapon, but Juliet has plans of her own, trying to escape. That's all I know on this. I know so many people love this series. I know so many people have mixed feelings on this, and I'm really hoping I can get to all of them, but we shall see. That's 100% getting read for sure. Some of these are fever dreams, but I know that one is going to get read. And then this next one I had on my January TBR of this year, and that is Skin by Ibiza Boy. And I really want to read this one as well too. It's another standalone fantasy as well. And basically what it is it follows these two sisters where they figure out that they have powers and that there's something that underneath their skin, there's some type of ancient magic, and how looking beneath the surface can be more explosive to relationships around them than any ancient magic. And it kind of just follows from there. I heard nothing about this. I just kind of found this and was just very intrigued, not only by the description, but also by the cover. And that one might also be a little bit of a pipe dream, but it's also on my 26 books to read in 2026. So I'm hoping that can get done as well too. And then this next one, so many people were so excited for this. And not gonna lie, I tried to read this author once and then I DNF'd it for now at least. I want to come back to it. But the book that recently she released was Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. I plan on reading this for a vlog coming up sooner rather than later for filming wise, but you guys won't get it until a couple weeks after the fact of filming. And from what I've heard is it follows these three vampires from three different times, or just I think it just follows three different girls from three different time periods specifically. And one of the main things I've heard with marketing with this is toxic lesbian vampires. And you know me, I love some good lesbians and maybe some good toxicity and some good vampires, but this one is 100% getting read. I know that for certain. I do regret not getting this signed copy, but also at the same time, I like my Book of the Month copy. So, I'm not too worried about that at least. And then this next one that I have is I Was Born for This by Alice Oseman. This is, I believe, her third YA novel, and pretty much what this follows is it follows this girl named Angel who really loves this boy band called The Ark, and she loves being a part of the Ark's fandom and such, and her family doesn't understand why she likes the band and things like that, but Angel feels there are things about her they'll never understand. And then Jimmy, who is a part of the Ark, his fans are very accepting that he's trans and things like that, and so many people and so many things like that. And I've heard that, I actually haven't heard much from this, but I saw and I was like, I have to read it because Alice Oseman is one of my favorite authors of all time, pretty much. And then this next one is actually an e-arc, and that is The Witch and the Huntress by Luna McNamara, I think is how you pronounce her last name. I got this as an e-arc a while back, and it's coming out in April, so I 100% want to read that before April time specifically. And the reason why it's on here is because I want it to, and I'm not gonna lie, I should have pulled up the stuff for it because I do not remember what this one is about. But pretty much what this is it follows Medea, who possesses both witchcraft and cunning, yet she allures a lonely and constrained life under the ruler of her wicked father, Ates. I feel like it's kind of just like a sapphic reimagining and such of the acclaimed author of Psyches and Eros. I think I'm a little bit iffy on my Greek mythology, to say the least, but it's fine. And one of the reasons why I want to read that one is, one, it's an e-arc. I need to read it sooner rather than later. But it's one of those things where it looked very intriguing, and I want to get into more books that have more of a Greek mythology past to them. So that's one of the main reasons specifically that I want to read that. My next one is actually an author that I have not read in a hot minute, but again, one of the first authors that really got me into reading and such like that, and that is King of Envy by Anna Huang. This is the last published book of the Kings of Sin series that I need to read, and I've been putting it off for some reason. I still can't tell you why exactly, but this one follows Volk and Ayana. Volk is very much known for shunning human interactions. I've also heard that he's mute as well too, so he doesn't really speak that much. And he saw Ayana first, and he really wants her, but she's engaged to his best friend, and it's kind of like a forbidden type of romance, you know. And then with Ayana, to the world, she tends to lead a perfect life, but at the same time, her engagement is just a business affair. He gets his inheritance, and she gets the money that she needs to leave her abusive agency and such, and then it kind of follows from there. I've heard that this one is very much on the realms of her more morally gray style of writing, which is great. I don't really have much against her morally gray stuff, but it's just cool. Good for you. So that's why that's on there. And then this is another random one because I just felt like it, because I feel like I read also a lot of thrillers when also in the springtime, and that is Ghostwriter by Julie Clark. From what I remember about this one is it follows this family called the Taylors, where most of them are found dead in their own home, and the only surviving sibling, Vincent, never shakes the accusations and whispers of him potentially being the one who killed his family. And then decades later and such, his career as a horror writer skyrockets pretty much, And then ghostwriter Olivia Dumont, she spends her entire professional life hiding the fact that she's the only child of Vincent, and that she is the one that is writing his novel, where after 50 years of silence, he's ready to talk about what finally happened in that fateful night where his family got murdered. Again, very intriguing, very, very exciting and such. And the cover looks absolutely stunning. And that's also another reason why I bought that as well too. And this next one is actually a book that I actually recently bought, and it looked good because, one, I'm also trying to get into more fiction novels, and that is The Berry Pickers by Amanda Peters. This one is basically following a tradition of Indigenous workers from Nova Scotia. This family basically travels to Maine to pick berries for the summer, and then weeks later, their 4-year-old Ruthie, the family's youngest child, vanishes. She's last seen by her younger brother Joe, who is very distraught about her sister's disappearance for years to come. And then in Maine, a young girl named Nora grows up as an only child of an affluent family, and Norma is often troubled by recurring dreams and visions that seem more like memories than imagination. And then as she grows older, Norma slowly comes to realize that there's something her parents aren't telling her, and she goes on to figure out what those family secrets are. I think this was like popular like maybe like years ago or so, but I have no idea. I picked it because the back of the book sounded really intriguing, and again, trying to get into more fiction novels and such. All right, so this next one is another popular one that I think, did it win a Goodreads Choice Award? I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it was a nominee, but it's The Names by Florence Knapp. Pretty much what this one, from what I know about it, is that it follows this woman who had just given birth, and she's going down to the registry to name her son, and the dad wants her to name their son after him because it's been a tradition, but she wants to name him a completely different name, and then the sister wants to name him a completely different thing. And so from what I've heard is that it follows pretty much spanning the life of like 30 years or so, following the alternate versions and alternate names of Cora's last minute choice of name, pretty much. And it follows like through like the messiness of domestic abuse and things like that. And it just really intrigued me when I heard about it, and people really loving this story as well. So that's also another reason why I decided to choose that one. And then this one is a book that is on my 26 books to read in 2026, and that is Recursion by Blake Crouch. From what I know about this one is there is a disease that goes around that's spreading through people that are giving them memories of a life they never lived, and basically trying to figure out like where exactly this disease is coming from, how it can be cured, and how it can be stopped. And this detective is close to the truth in a remote laboratory where Helen Smith is unaware that she holds the key to this great mystery and the tools for fighting back. And then as they have to confront their enemies before they and the world are trapped in a loop of ever-growing chaos. Blake Crouch, from what I've heard, is a really, really good science fiction writer. And again, I've been wanting to get into science fiction as well too. So that's why that is on there. And then this one is going to be a beefy boy, but it's going to be read this year because it's a book club pick of mine, I believe in April. And that is 11/22/63 by Stephen King. And I feel like I don't really need to talk about this one too much. I'm just going to have it in my hand because I can't hold up this brick for a long time. But basically, it follows this teacher named Jack Evan who gets pretty much like, he gets basically chosen to stop JFK's assassination, pretty much. That's how I would describe this novel. I've also heard that it is a romance novel in disguise, which, Stephen King? Romance? That'll be interesting to see. And then coming up on the second to last one is, I'm going to audiobook this one, and that is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. This is becoming a movie, I think. I think it's coming out later this year. And from what I know is it's about this dude where he's the sole survivor on this spaceship, and he wakes up not knowing his name or how he got there in the first place. So you're kind of following from there and things like that. It's very sci-fi heavy and very much just like funny from what I've heard. And honestly, I'm really curious to see how Ryan Gosling does this story. And the last one that I have on here is Her Last Breath by Taylor Adams. I have been really, really excited for this one. It actually released today as I am recording this. And just to kind of like read a little bit about what it is this girl named Tess. She finally agrees to go caving with her best friend Allie, and their lives have pretty much diverged like sharply since like high school. Allie is a self-made travel influencer, while Tess is a shy and claustrophobic legal assistant struggling to pay for law school and such. And then they descend into these depths in cave diving, and then a stranger who claims to be a fellow caver starts harassing them, and then Allie decides to insult the guy, and the dude retaliates. And soon Tessa is trapped in a narrow crawl space, hundreds of feet underground, fighting to stay alive. And then 24 hours later, as she's hospitalized, she's recounting the harrowing story of survival. And the detective interviewing her shares new and shocking secrets about Allie's past. Together, they begin to suspect that the brutal attack was not so random after all. Now, I am someone who does not like the idea of caving or spelunking whatsoever. I have listened too much to the Nutty Putty Cave incident with John getting stuck, and it was just like, oh, that just solidified where I'm just like, ugh. But also it's like Taylor Adams. I'm going to read his books no matter what, you know? He's become a favorite author now of mine, and I've only read one of his books so far. But I don't have that copy yet. I should be getting it tomorrow at least, but yeah, that is pretty much my spring TBR. And of course, that ends this video. So thank you guys again for watching. Be sure to like and comment down below. If you don't know what to comment down below, tell me a couple of the books that you plan on reading in spring, or if you plan on reading any of the books that I recommend in this video. Again, don't forget to subscribe and turn on post notifications. And I try and post every single Sunday and every other Wednesday. And yeah, I hope you guys have an amazing day, week, month, and year. See you later, friends.